Chapter 461. No one was willing to surrender, and no one would be willing to die. This was especially true for the big shots in high positions. So these two choices were not choices. For Jiang Qiansong, who had stepped into Lin Fengting's sword intent, this was no longer a matter of choice. He had no choice at all. As the patriarch of the Jiang family of South America, it was unacceptable to lose his freedom or his life. Jiang Qiansong's face changed. When he met the follower, he had already vaguely noticed that something was wrong. However, the largest underground base of the Jiang family of South America in Eastern Europe was extremely hidden, and all of it was built by loyal and reliable men of sacrifice. When the Polar Ground Alliance was strong and the Jiang family of South America and Rekvia cooperated happily, the important figures of the Jiang family of South America hardly came here a few times. It could be said that there was no clue at all. Jiang Qiansong was confident that the follower did not know the specific location here. He was confident that no one could know here. He was full of confidence, but he stepped into an extremely deadly trap and encirclement on the way he had to pass. Jiang Qiansong's heart was suddenly in a mess, and he vaguely felt that even the cold wind blowing at night was extremely bitter. The Jiang family of South America was not going well today. All kinds of setbacks could even be said to be the day with the heaviest losses in recent decades. What was even more depressing was that Jiang Qiansong still did not know what was going on. "How did you know here?" Jiang Qiansong asked with a gloomy face. Now in retrospect, the followers seemed to have advised him not to come here. What did this mean? It meant that not only the follower knew this place, but the other party even knew that Qin Weibai and the others would also appear here. But at that time, his words were interrupted by the master of Samsara Palace. And even if he finished, Jiang Qiansong could not believe it with his mentality at that time. Jiang Qiansong silently observed the three people around him. He took a look at Lin Fengting and gave up all his thoughts. Once such an expert at the peak of the invincible realm used his sword with all his strength, the sword energy would be like the vast sea. Jiang Qiansong was famous for his defense, but it was not absolute. At least with his power, he could not afford to provoke such an expert, let alone break through. Gong Sunqi, this general of Zhongzhou state, who was known as the strongest invincible realm combat capability, was also difficult to deal with. Jiang Qiansong could not kill Gong Sunqi in an instant. If he wanted to break through and escape, he would almost fail if he could not kill Gong Sunqi in an instant. Jiang Qiansong glanced at Qin Weibai out of the corner of his eye. Qin Weibai stood there quietly, elegant and cold, seemingly defenseless. Jiang Qiansong's eyes suddenly became twisted and filled with hatred. "It's you, right? You know this place?" The Lin clan did not enter the secular world. Although the major branches were domineering, they were not unreasonable. There was no irreconcilable grievance between the Jiang family of South America and the Lin clan. It was just normal friction. He did not believe that the Lin clan would investigate the major bases of the Jiang family of South America so carefully. As for the Jiang family of South America and Zhongzhou state, it could be said that there were constant conflicts. If Gong Sunqi could find this place, this base would not have survived until today. It would have been wiped out by the Arctic Ocean Command. Only the Samsara Palace. Moreover, the intelligence system of Samsara Palace was unparalleled in the world. Sometimes, it seemed that their intelligence system was like a dark hand that quietly reached into the superpowers to obtain intelligence, stir up the situation, and even had the intention of turning the world upside down. Among the three people in front, Qin Weibai was the one who was most likely to find this place. "Is that important?" Qin Weibai asked in a flat tone. She stood within Lin Fengting's sword intent, less than 10 meters away from Jiang Qiansong, but Jiang Qiansong did not dare to make a move. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his expression had become extremely sincere. "We can talk," he said seriously. Qin Weibai lowered her head in thought. When she was silent, Lin Fengting and Gong Sunqi were also silent, with no intention of speaking at all. Jiang Qiansong's heart kept sinking. The three people who blocked him tonight had their own backgrounds. They represented Samsara Palace, the Lin clan, and Zhongzhou state. It seemed that the woman in front of him was the leader of the three? Jiang Qiansong pursed his lips. Samsara Palace and the Jiang family of South America had been fighting in every corner of the Dark World for the past 3 years. As the patriarch of the Jiang family of South America, supported by the strong foundation of the Jiang family of South America, he was still at a disadvantage in the battle with Samsara Palace, which had almost no foundation. Jiang Qiansong naturally understood how difficult it was to deal with the young but perfect woman in front of him. But now that he was forced to this point, he really had no room to resist. There are still 2 choices. Qin Weibai finally said, "Are you buying your life? Or buying your freedom?" "I want both," Jiang Qiansong said in a deep voice. His words were very domineering. Qin Weibai chuckled and said calmly, "You can't afford it." Jiang Qiansong did not speak, but his eyes were extremely determined. Qin Weibai smiled and offered her price. "A human head. As long as Jiang Guochu's head is here, freedom and life are all yours." "Bitch, what did you say?" Jiang Qiansong suddenly roared. He really did not expect that the so-called price Qin Weibai offered would be so outrageous. Jiang Guochu, the only heir of the Jiang family of South America, Jiang Qiansong's biological son. Jiang Guochu, who was only in his early 30s this year, could be said to be the most qualified genius of the Jiang family of South America in the past 200 years. Now his combat capability of the invincible realm could fully prove his talent. More importantly, Jiang Guochu had already found his way to the invincible realm. In other words, now as long as he wanted to do it, he could break through the invincible realm at any time. No one doubted his qualification and potential. Everyone in the Jiang family of South America believed that Jiang Guochu could become an expert at the peak of the invincible realm at the age of 40, or at least infinitely close to this realm. What did this mean? Jiang Qiansong himself was not at the peak of the invincible realm, and he could not even get close to it. This was the future hope of the Jiang family of South America. Qin Weibai wanted his head, which was equivalent to destroying the Jiang family of South America. Jiang Qiansong stared at Qin Weibai, and the killing intent was surging all over his body, like a beast that would pounce on her at any time. Qin Weibai looked at Jiang Qiansong's eyes calmly. "What the hell do you want?" Jiang Qiansong gritted his teeth and asked word by word. "To be exact, what do the 3 of us want?" Qin Weibai said. Jiang Qiansong sneered. In extreme anger, his body trembled a little. But such a lineup really made him unable to resist. He glanced around and finally said coldly, "Name your price." "The Lin clan doesn't need it," Lin Fengting said blandly. Jiang Qiansong was stunned and did not speak. "I will talk to Mr. Jiang on behalf of Zhongzhou State. I will say in advance that there are many things. If you agree, Zhongzhou State will spare your life tonight." Gong Sunqi said. He used the word spare. Jiang Qiansong's facial muscles twitched fiercely and he looked at Qin Weibai. "The Samsara Palace needs a batch of equipment and weapons. I will give you a list. The list can be reduced, but the Jiang family of South America must give the Samsara Palace some cloud silk and lingjin." Qin Weibai's tone was as cold as a knife. The blade was bright and sharp. At this moment, Jiang Qiansong really felt that a piece of his flesh had been cut off, and blood was dripping. Not to mention the number of armaments that Qin Weibai wanted. The cloud silk and lingjin were the treasures of the Jiang family of South America. The cloud silk was the clothes that Li Tianlan and Gong Sunqi wore. Its defense was extremely strong. Only a woman like Qin Weibai, who wanted to give everything to Li Tianlan, and a superpower like Zhongzhou State, were willing to make a whole set of cloud silk clothes. Jiang Qiansong, who claimed to have the best defense in the world, only had a cloud silk undershirt. The cloud silk preserved by the Jiang family of South America could barely make a piece of clothes for Jiang Guochu, who claimed to be the future of the Jiang family of South America. If all these were given to Qin Weibai, the Jiang family of South America would lose a trump card. As for Lingjin, Jiang Qiansong's eyes flickered, as if he wanted to see through Qin Weibai completely. "I don't know what you're talking about." Jiang Qiansong looked at Qin Weibai and asked, "Lingjin? You don't know?" Qin Weibai asked. Jiang Qiansong just opened his mouth. You don't know, but Jiang Guochu will know. If I kill you and exchange your body for Lingjin, do you think your son will exchange it? It didn't matter whether he exchanged it or not. What mattered was that Qin Weibai was a powerful threat. Who betrayed the Jiang family of South America? Jiang Qiansong suddenly calmed down. I can give you Lingjin if you want, but I must know the name of the traitor. In essence, Lingjin, murderous weapons, and cloud silk were all space meteorites. The murderous weapons used to be life metal. After being transformed, they became murderous weapons that shocked the dark world. After being transformed, cloud silk became a defensive treasure. As for the nature of Lingjin, it was more complicated, and the energy it contained was more mysterious. After the Jiang family of South America got Lingjin, they had been secretly studying it and adding countless substances. Now Lingjin could almost be said to be a new substance. As for the use of Lingjin, there were also a lot of theoretical speculations. This matter was really top secret in the Jiang family of South America. Jiang Qiansong must know who revealed this news to Qin Weibai. A traitor of this level was not much less important than Lingjin. Qin Weibai thought for a moment and said slowly, Okay, I'll tell you the clues when I get it. Jiang Qiansong took a deep look at her. At least this sentence had proved a lot of things. Qin Weibai could give him clues. This meant that South America, there was really a traitor in the Jiang family. In fact, it was enough to know this. I need to make a phone call. Jiang Qiansong said with a poker face. Whatever. Qin Weibai said. Jiang Qiansong took out his mobile phone and dialed a number. When the number was connected, he suddenly raised his head and looked at Qin Weibai. Is there really a traitor in the Jiang family of South America? Qin Weibai nodded. Jiang Qiansong said, Oh, and suddenly asked straightforwardly, It's Jiang Guochu, isn't it? This question was extremely abrupt. Jiang Guochu was a traitor of the Jiang family of South America? Gong Sun Chi froze for a moment. Even Lin Fengting froze for a moment. This moment was extremely subtle and short. But in an instant, Jiang Qiansong, who had been prepared, suddenly raised his hand and threw the mobile phone at Lin Fengting. As soon as the mobile phone left his hand, a dazzling light suddenly burst out with the broken mobile phone. The whole night sky suddenly turned pale. This time only lasted for a second. Jiang Qiansong rushed forward without hesitation. For the first time in his nearly 60 years of life, Jiang Qiansong gave up all his defense so boldly and unrestrainedly. Attack with all his strength. 30-meter mortal world, gloomy hell. The cold, killing intent broke out completely with the distorted space. What Jiang Qiansong needed was this moment, the most perfect moment. Lin Fengting was blocked for a moment, and Jiang Qiansong chose Qin Weibai. At this moment, no one could stop him from attacking Qin Weibai. Lin Fengting couldn't do it. Neither could Gong Sun Chi. Only death awaited Qin Weibai. The distorted and broken space suddenly spread out. Jiang Qiansong reached out and waved his fist. But he hit nothing. How could it be? Jiang Qiansong said subconsciously. This moment was too short. How could Qin Weibai's reaction be so fast? The violent sword energy surged and boiled in an instant. An absolute dark sword intent appeared in the pale light. The sword intent spread and suppressed the white light almost in an instant. At the moment when black and white alternated, Jiang Qiansong subconsciously took a step back, and there was chaos in front of him. He blinked hard and looked straight ahead. Qin Weibai still stood where she was and didn't move. How could it be? Jiang Qiansong's face changed dramatically, and he repeated what he had just said. Countless sword energy kept rotating and whistling around him. There was silence between heaven and earth. Footsteps suddenly sounded. Jiang Qiansong turned his head slightly. In his sight, outside the storm of sword intent, Qin Weibai, Lin Fengting, Gong Sun Chi slowly walked over from another direction. So in Jiang Qiansong's sight, there were 2 Qin Weibai, 2 Lin Fengting, and 2 Gong Sun Chis. Jiang Qiansong's heart kept sinking. The sword intent was whistling in front of him. More and more footsteps kept sounding. From all directions, one figure after another slowly came over. More and more figures came, almost covering the mountains and plains. They were exactly the same people. They were all Qin Weibai. The sword intent was still whistling. On the top of the mountain, at the foot of the mountain, thousands of Qin Weibai stood there, almost occupying the whole world. Qin Weibai was a beauty. No one in the whole dark world dared to deny this. This kind of beauty was flawless, like a dream or a fantasy. It was devastatingly beautiful and it was peerless. But when thousands of the same Qin Weibai appeared in front of him, this kind of beauty turned into pressure and almost suffocating power. Jiang Qinsong's face was pale. Looking at the increasing figures, he felt like he was in a nightmare. You. In the face of such a strange scene, Jiang Qinsong couldn't even say a complete word. The Qin Weibai all over the mountains and plains seemed to form an identical legion, and the legion was slowly advancing. Jiang Qinsong swallowed with difficulty, and his voice became unprecedentedly dry. This is the transcendent realm in the spiritual domain? The transcendent realm. In the world, only the Pope had reached the transcendent realm in the spiritual domain. The scene in front of him might be the manifestation of the transcendent realm, or it might not be. But these were not what Jiang Qinsong could see through. What he was good at was defending against attacks. Qin Weibai didn't answer this question. She held the cup and lowered her head to drink some water. Then she looked up at Jiang Qinsong, whose face was pale, and said lightly, "Do you want to die? Divine Emperor of 9 Heavens." Chapter 462. Compared with Eastern Europe, which was already in a storm, Xianxia state, which claimed to be the strongest country in the world, was still calm. However, under the pressure of almost all the powerful countries in the world, the calm Hidden Dragon Sea had long become oppressive and dull. Every high-level official in Xianxia state was paying close attention to the situation in Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe was in chaos. If they wanted to gain something in the chaos, they needed an indomitable spirit. This was the truth. But no one had expected Li Tianlan to act so fast that no one had time to respond. The war in Wulan state was vigorous. The only thing Xianxia state could do was to be silent. Xianxia state's statement to the outside world was that it had lost contact with Li Tianlan. In fact, from the war in Wulan state to the present, Xianxia state had never contacted Li Tianlan. Everyone was closely watching everything in Wulan state, and everyone knew the importance of this battle. Li Tianlan led the Snowdance Corps to battle. The result of this battle was related to the international image and prestige of Xianxia state, as well as the glory of the Li family in the past. Therefore, no matter for Xianxia state or Li Tianlan, they could only win this battle. Dongqing Wudi talked with Li Huaqing in the Hidden Dragon Sea all night last night. When Reki City gradually fell into the night, Yuzhou had already ushered in the morning. The sky was slightly dim. The air was slightly cool. The two top giants in the entire Xianxia state in the chaos in Eastern Europe walked out of the president's office and walked unhurriedly in the Hidden Dragon Sea. Dongqing Wudi's face was relaxed and peaceful. Even when the war broke out in Reki City and Xianxia state was under the greatest pressure, he never showed the slightest worry or anxiety. As for President Li Huaqing of Xianxia state, he had already begun to talk about the future. It's necessary to strengthen the relationship with the Qin clan. We didn't take down Wulan state back then, so the attitude of the Qin clan has been very ambiguous for many years. This time, Qin Shilai took the initiative to take action, which is a good opportunity. The Arctic Ocean Command has had a hard time in recent years. This time, if we take down Wulan state, we can really revitalize the game of Eastern Europe. At this time, if we can get the support of the Qin clan, it will be of great significance to us. In the slightly dim morning light, Li Huaqing handed Dongqing Wudi a cigarette with a smile and said in a casual tone. Dongqing Wudi lit his cigarette, took a deep breath, and nodded. The situation in Eastern Europe is chaotic, but it's very simple in essence. In the final analysis, it's a game between the 4 families. Now Rekvia is close to Xianxia state. If we can persuade the Qin clan, our position in Eastern Europe will be completely stable. Tianlan did a good job this time. To be honest, I'm amazed by his decisiveness and speed. Li Huaqing smiled and said, "Well, in a few days, I plan to go to Wulan State in person and bring a group there. I will only inform the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Is Wudi interested?" Dongqing Wudi hesitated, shook his head and said, "I'm not sure yet. The military has been quite busy lately." Now he was the standing minister of the army headquarters. If Xianxia State was in a sensitive period of war, the power of this position was even greater than that of the prime minister. Even in the prosperous times, Dongqing Wudi's current position could be regarded as the third most powerful person in Xianxia State in terms of real power. His position was there, but the army headquarters was not the border control corps after all. It was difficult for him to keep his word. Li Tianlan was now in Eastern Europe, and he could be said to be Li Tianlan's biggest supporter. At this time, it was much safer for him to stay in the army headquarters to control the situation than to go to Eastern Europe in person. "How can I not be sure?" Li Huaqing laughed. He seemed to want to say something else, but Dongqing Wudi's cell phone rang first. Dongqing Wudi glanced at the number, and his face froze slightly. After he picked it up, he said hello in a deep voice. The person on the other end of the phone reported something in a very fast tone. Dongqing Wudi's body became completely relaxed. He put down the phone and said slowly, "Tianlan has arrived at the office of the president." Li Huaqing suddenly burst out laughing and was in high spirits. This news completely showed that the long and complicated night in Reki City was completely over. Reki City now had Li Tianlan and the Snowdance Corps. There was even Sword Emperor Wang Tianzong. The 5 Eastern European countries, headed by Wulan State, were like a thorn inserted between Xianxia State and the Arctic Ocean Command. From tonight on, they would all operate under the will of Xianxia State. This was Li Tianlan's credit. But wasn't it also Li Huaqing's achievement? "Then you and I should go to Eastern Europe and see how elegant the star flag is in a foreign country," Li Huaqing said in high spirits. His term of office had come to an end. Since taking office, Li Huaqing's actions had been wise and steady. But surrounded by the general trend of Xianxia State, he could not be regarded as a strong president. He had only shown a little bit of brilliance in recent years. The chaos in Eastern Europe was so perfect that Li Huaqing really wanted to show off the power of Xianxia State to the world. "Why don't you let Tianlan come back?" Dongqing Wudi's face was extremely calm. He suddenly said calmly, "Come back?" Li Huaqing froze for a moment, narrowed his eyes, and looked at Dongqing Wudi. "It's enough to do this," Dongqing Wudi said. But he only stayed in Eastern Europe for less than a day. Li Huaqing felt that this request was extremely absurd. Plus some aftermath work, he can always stay for a week. And time doesn't mean anything. Tianlan's actions are right there. Who dares to deny his merits? The original intention of Xianxia State to restart the Snowdance Corps was essentially to compete for the interests of Eastern Europe. Li Tianlan's series of actions could be said to be really swift and decisive. Within a day, the 5 countries in Eastern Europe changed. The Jiang family of South America suffered heavy losses. Rekvia turned to Xianxia State and even established a good relationship with the Qin clan. No matter what the process was, the result was perfect. It could even be said that this was the interest that Xianxia State wanted. From today on, the Arctic Ocean Command would become a force that no one in Europe could ignore. Xianxia State would become extremely aloof in all of Eastern Europe. Enough. It was really enough. Countless superpowers were involved in the chaos in Eastern Europe. Every power had the ambition to completely take over Eastern Europe, but no one thought that they could really do it. This was a game involving the entire Dark World. There would be countless losers who would leave in the middle of the game. But there might not be only one winner in the end. Li Tianlan had done this. Xianxia State, which had gained control of the 5 countries in Eastern Europe, was now one of the winners. It was enough to do this. Li Huaqing looked at Dongqing Wudi and frowned without saying a word. Dongqing Wudi's expression was still indifferent, but his voice suddenly became cold. "Mr. President, who do you think let King Tong go to Reki City?" "What do you mean?" Li Huaqing's face became completely serious. "She went to Reki City because she and the Shadow Throne appealed to the interests of Wulan State, but Wang Tianzong might have acquiesced in it. The incident of the 5 countries in Eastern Europe was a great contribution, which was enough to help Tianlong get out of the trap in Eastern Europe. He took down the 5 countries in Eastern Europe, was seriously injured, and returned to China to recuperate. Who could say anything more? King Tong went to Reki City and wanted to snatch the interests of the 5 countries in Eastern Europe from Tianlong. Although the Wang family of Beihai didn't want to give up the 5 countries in Eastern Europe, with Wang Tianzong's courage, he wouldn't show such an ugly expression. Wang Tianzong wanted Reki City not because of those interests. The most important thing was that he didn't want Tianlong to take all the credit and return to Zhongzhou state. Dongqing Wudi said in a cold voice. He still has his plan. He wants Tianlong to die in Eastern Europe on the charge of treason. At that time, he will get the current Li family, the giant group, and even the chaos within the Southeast group. With these, what are the 5 countries in Eastern Europe? Li Huaqing thought for a while and then said slowly, "So you want Tianlong to come back?" Dongqing Wudi nodded. It's the best time for him to come back. The more Wang Tianzong doesn't want Tianlong to do, the more we have to let him do it. No, Li Huaqing said softly. His voice was soft but full of firmness. He can't come back. Dongqing Wudi looked at Li Huaqing and narrowed his eyes quietly. Li Huaqing suddenly smiled. Wudi, do you know why I support Tianlong? Why did Li Huaqing support Li Tianlong? This was tantamount to asking why the academics supported Li Tianlong. Thinking about it in this way, there would be many answers. The reason why Li Huaqing was not strong was that the academics did not have enough foundation and could not compete with the Southeast Group and the Prince Group. The academics had no power in the most sensitive special warfare system. By supporting Li Tianlong, the academics wanted to fight for a future. By supporting Li Tianlong, it was tantamount to winning over Sai City. By supporting Li Tianlong, it could get a lot of chips from Samsara Palace. By supporting Li Tianlong, the academics now had the support of the giant group. These were all reasons. But that wasn't the only reason. Because Tianlong is suitable. Li Huaqing gave the answer quietly. Daybreak's eyes shone on his face, and there was a profound halo in his eyes. From a selfish point of view, supporting Tianlong will bring me a lot of benefits, but I also have to bear a lot of risks and costs. The collapse of the Li family was full of inside stories. Now I support Tianlong. From a certain point of view, it is tantamount to supporting the civil strife of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou state in the next few years, and even the civil strife of the whole Zhongzhou state. So many people don't like Tianlong and the Li family. Even those who used to respect the Li family may feel that what happened to the Li family today is unfair, but they will not welcome the Li family back to the high-level stage of Zhongzhou state, because the general trend does not allow it, because the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City do not allow it. If they do not allow it, and the Li family does not listen, there will be war, turmoil, conflict, and even chaos. What I said today may become the most unstable factor in Zhongzhou state in the next few years, and it may also bring irreversible losses and harm to Zhongzhou state. If these things happen, I will be responsible, and so will you. Dongqing Wudi listened quietly without saying a word. But I still chose to support Tianlong and the chaos he will bring to Zhongzhou state in the future. All of this is because of his entrance maneuver at the Sky Academy. Li Huaqing said quietly. Dongqing Wudi thought of that entrance maneuver. Li Tianlong killed 2 important tasks of the Lu family in that maneuver. Dongqing Wudi wondered what the reason was. Kunlun City is very good. For now, it's really good. Gu Xingyun may have been despicable at the beginning, but none of us can deny that in the more than 20 years since he became the war god of Zhongzhou state, he has never done anything wrong to Zhongzhou state. But I think Kunlun City is still not qualified. If Gu Xingyun is the second in command of the special warfare system, or just a big force in Zhongzhou state, I can accept it. In these positions, Gu Xingyun will even do better. In the more than 20 years since he became the war god of Zhongzhou state, foreign superpowers have rarely invaded Zhongzhou state, but the prestige of Zhongzhou state in the dark world has been declining. Because Gu Xingyun is too shrewd. He is like a businessman. He will choose to weigh and compromise. Even I am amazed by the subtlety of his advance and retreat in some things. Li Huaqing laughed self-deprecatingly. But this is not what I want. It's not what Zhongzhou state wants. It shouldn't even be what Gu Xingyun should have. The war god of Zhongzhou state can weigh, compromise, and be like a businessman. He can do anything but only one thing: he can't retreat. He is the war god of Zhongzhou state, and he protects the whole Zhongzhou state. How can he retreat? He can't retreat even a step. That is a position where there is no retreat. No matter what he encounters, whether it is a storm, a huge wave, a thunderbolt, a landslide, or the end of the world, he is the war god, and he must stand there. He can only move forward and never retreat. Because behind him, one step away, is the whole country he wants to protect. Li Huaqing took a deep breath. Gu Xingyun can't do this. Although he has done a good job over the years, if he encounters a more severe situation that he can't handle, he will definitely retreat. But the Li family in the past would not do that, and neither would the current Li family. Li Honghe, Li Tianlan, and even Li Guangdu, any one of them in this position would do their best when they encountered a crisis that they could not handle. Even if they died there, they would not take half a step back. They would rather break than bend and die than retreat. This is the war god of Zhongzhou state I want. Tianlan's performance in Eastern Europe proves that my choice is correct. But if you let him come back now, maybe after many years, he will become another Gu Xingyun. This is not what I want, really not. Li Huaqing looked at the silent Dongqing Wudi and said softly, "And are you sure that if you let Tianlan come back now, he will come back?" Dongqing Wudi thought for a while and shook his head. "I'm not sure." "I'm sure." Li Huaqing laughed. "At this time, even if you ask him to come back, he won't come back. But it's too dangerous for him to be in Eastern Europe." Dongqing Wudi frowned. "Qin Weibai is there," Li Huaqing said softly. He looked into Dongqing Wudi's eyes. "Wudi, remember, don't underestimate Qin Weibai at any time. I mean at any time. As for some risks, they are destined to exist. It's the case in Eastern Europe and everything Tianlan will encounter in the future. If he loses on the trip to Eastern Europe, the giant group will not have a good end, and the academics will not be able to stay out of trouble. But if he wins, he will win the qualification to replace Gu Xingyun. Such a war god of Zhongzhou state is the most reassuring to me." Li Huaqing said softly, "It's about the future of a country. I'm willing to bet the future of the giant group and the academics on a stable future for Zhongzhou state." Chapter 463. In his own country, in his own capital, in his own power center, he was asked to give up his seat by a foreign marshal. This could be said to be the most humiliating moment in the history of Wulan state. It was also the most humiliating moment in President Carlos's life. There was a flash of anger in his eyes, and he looked up at Li Tianlan's eyes. This was the office of the president. He was sitting here in the high-level conference room. He was the core of the entire Wulan state. Li Tianlan said that this was not his seat. This was his seat. That was what Carlos thought. So in the conference room that was still echoing with the smell of blood, he said so directly, "Your Highness, this is my seat." Carlos said. Li Tianlan suddenly laughed. Judging from his appearance, he really had nothing to do with the word handsome. He had a very ordinary face. Because he was young, he was slightly delicate. But at this time, when Li Tianlan laughed, he had an unparalleled style, cold and awe-inspiring. He looked back at the high-level officials in the conference room and said calmly, "Who can testify?" At this moment, Li Tianlan stood there. Even though he was seriously injured and pale, he still had a kind of domineering aura. He was awe-inspiring. The whole conference room was silent. No matter if they were in favor of war or peace, no one made a sound when their president was asked to give up his seat. Secretive politicians, iron-blooded generals, everyone's blood seemed to freeze with the death of General Joel. Of course, humiliation would be embarrassing. But living was more important than anything else. It was anything else. Carlos's eyes swept across every high-level official in the conference room. Every one of the higher-ups who met his gaze subconsciously turned their heads away. Even the prime minister turned his head. Carlos's face was a little pale. In a short period of time, he only got one feeling when he looked at everyone. the feeling of being betrayed. Li Tianlan's fingers tapped on the table unhurriedly and said calmly, "Stand up." His voice was very soft. However, Carlos could see an undisguised killing intent in his eyes. Carlos finally clearly realized the identity of the other party. The other party was the marshal in the special warfare system of Xianxia state, not belonging to the military. He was the youngest highness in the Dark World. He was a madman who broke the deadlock in Eastern Europe without hesitation. In one day, 3 invincible realm experts died, and 2 of them were killed by him. Now that he had the most elite army in the world, he was almost undefeatable. The youngest prince. The most elite army. The former conquered Rekvia in a single day. The latter defeated Wulan state in one day. He was invincible. Carlos slowly stood up. He looked at many high-level officials who lowered their heads as if they could not see this scene, and smiled self-mockingly. Today, you not only gave up on me, but also on Wulan state. No one would support him, the president who was forced to give up his position in his own mansion. After today, he was destined to step down. But who would these people who still sat at the top of Wulan state represent in the future? Carlos suddenly realized that he was no longer qualified to think about this question. He slowly turned around and walked out the door. A voice rang out behind him. "Stop right there." Carlos's body stiffened. He turned to look at Li Tianlan and asked, "Your Highness, what can I do for you?" Before today, Xianxia state and Wulan state had always been close friends, Li Tianlan said calmly. There can be misunderstandings between friends. After that, it's nothing more than an apology and a meal to solve the problem. However, misunderstandings between countries could lead to death. The Jiang family of South America intends to get involved in Wulan state and even wants to set off a political revolution here. For the sake of the stability of Wulan state, I rushed hundreds of miles away, but I was regarded as an enemy by Wulan state. Li Tianlan laughed. His smile was cold and ferocious. The luxurious conference table began to collapse silently. Wood chips flew everywhere. As the sword energy swept through, a large amount of dust fell to the ground. More than 2,000 elite soldiers were buried in Eastern Europe. Is this all because of our enthusiasm? Xianxia state has the feelings of a great country, but does my army deserve to die? Wulan state, Oga state, and Ross state should be mainly responsible for this matter. You don't give me an explanation, but ask me what else I want? What else do you want? Jirosis instinctively sensed the danger. This kind of danger did not come from Li Tianlan's killing intent, but from the instinct of being in a high position and used to seeing countless conspiracies. His palm trembled subconsciously, and he forced himself to calm down and said, "Prime Minister Riker can give you the explanation that your Highness wants." Riker, who had been extremely silent since Li Tianlan appeared, suddenly raised his head and looked at Li Tianlan. His eyes were a little nervous and even a little pleading. General Tostel, the new patriarch of Rekvia, put a cup of coffee in front of Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan picked it up and took a sip. In a short period of time, countless eyes in the conference room met and intertwined, and the atmosphere became extremely strange. Li Tianlan glanced thoughtfully at Prime Minister Riker, who was tense, and then shook his head. He looked at Carlos and said lightly, "I only want to talk to you about this matter." Prime Minister Riker, who had been in a cold sweat in a short period of time, breathed a sigh of relief. He looked at Li Tianlan, and there was a flash of gratitude in his eyes. No matter how absurd Li Tianlan's previous words were, at least he wanted Wulan state to give him an explanation. This matter was true. And this matter was very normal. Li Tianlan won tonight. If Jiang Qiansong won tonight, he would also want an explanation. The key was that such an explanation was easy to give, but also not easy to give. It was understandable that Li Tianlan wanted an explanation. But who dared to talk to Li Tianlan at the top of Wulan state? Whoever talked would die. Xianxia state was under great pressure in one day. More than 2,000 soldiers were sacrificed, and they encountered a Li family that desperately needed all kinds of strength. The price that Li Tianlan was about to offer, the so-called explanation he wanted, would definitely be unimaginably high. Ceding land, indemnities, and all kinds of conditions were enough to be recorded in the history of Wulan State. The saddest thing was that there was almost no room for bargaining with Li Tianlan in today's Wulan State. The Snowdance Corps dispatched only 5,000 elites. They acted in batches. 3,000 people directly defeated half of Wulan State's military force without heavy firepower. If 20,000 people of the Snowdance Corps were dispatched at the same time, what would happen? Under such circumstances, no matter what Li Tianlan asked, Wulan State could only accept it. Whoever represented Wulan State to talk to Li Tianlan about this matter would have his name recorded in the history of Wulan State. It was not to be recorded in history. The price to pay for losing power and humiliating a country was to be infamous for thousands of years. There were only two people present who were most qualified to be infamous for thousands of years. One was President Carlos. The other was Prime Minister Riker. Li Tianlan chose Carlos. From this moment on, Riker knew that he was safe, and Carlos was completely abandoned. Xianxia State abandoned Carlos. They needed someone with enough prestige to take control of the current situation. Riker was the only candidate. He could even become the president and become a key pawn for Li Tianlan to stay in Wulan State to check and balance Rekvia. At this moment, everything could be said to be a national disaster for Wulan State. But Prime Minister Riker suddenly found that his future might be infinitely beautiful. He froze in place, and his thoughts were complicated. For a moment, he seemed to have forgotten how much he needed to pay for this kind of beauty. Your Highness, Carlos suddenly emphasized, this is Wulan State. Li Tianlan said calmly, my Wulan State. Carlos suddenly felt powerless. He stood in place with a blank face, and his heart was as dead as ashes. I can't represent Xianxia State fully, but here, I can represent the Snowdance Corps and the Arctic Ocean Command. So from my personal standpoint, I have two requirements. First, within 3 days, hand over the bodies of all the victims of the Snowdance Corps. They fought for Wulan State, but were killed by Wulan State. The compensation for each martyr in each country must not be less than 2 million yuan. Second, withdraw your accusation at the United Nations, apologize to Xianxia State at the United Nations meeting, clarify the misunderstanding, and expose the conspiracy of the Jiang family of South America. Xianxia State will be responsible for protecting the security of Wulan State and avoiding a repeat of today's incident. Wulan State is obliged to establish a garrison base for Xianxia State. As a witness of the reconciliation of the two countries, the star flag of Xianxia State must be seen wherever the flag of Wulan State can be seen in the future. Third, Your Highness, you said that you only had two requirements. A high-level official finally couldn't help but stand up. His face was extremely angry, and his eyes were full of shame. But his voice was extremely weak, and he seemed to be a little timid and out of breath. Li Tianlan glanced at him, thought for a moment, and said, Did I say that? The high-level official opened his mouth. Just as he was about to speak, Li Tianlan said expressionlessly, Shut up. If you don't shut up, I'll make you close your eyes. The pale high-level official slowly sat down. Li Tianlan was silent for a while. He seemed to forget what he wanted to say. He shook his head, waved his hand, and said, That's all. These are my requirements. Who agrees and who objects? There was silence. But an unprecedented heaviness suddenly pressed on the hearts of every high-level official. Wulan State, which the Arctic Ocean Command had been trying to penetrate for more than 20 years, was finally lost. The loss to Wulan State was completely unimaginable. And everyone knew that this was only Li Tianlan's own request, not Xianxia State's. Li Tianlan asked for a lot, or it could be said to be very little, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Xianxia State would definitely take away all the things that should be taken away. But no one in the conference room spoke. No one dared. At this extremely delicate moment, as the winner, what Li Tianlan said was the law. Whoever dared to speak, Li Tianlan would definitely make him close his eyes. Li Tianlan waited for a while. Seeing that no one spoke, he nodded and said directly, The meeting is over. Again, no one objected. The high-level officials stood up one by one and walked out of the conference room in turn. President Carlos did not leave. Prime Minister Riker did not leave either. Qin Shilai, who followed Li Tianlan in, nodded to Li Tianlan, followed Tostel out of the conference room, and closed the door of the conference room. There were only Li Tianlan and the two highest authorities of Wulan State in the entire conference room. "You're very smart." Li Tianlan looked at Prime Minister Riker and said calmly. The Prime Minister, who had never bowed to anyone in Wulan State, bowed deeply to Li Tianlan and did not get up for a long time. Li Tianlan casually pointed at the coffee cup in front of him. Riker stood up, took the cup, and walked to the coffee machine. Li Tianlan glanced at Carlos and said calmly, "Sit down." Carlos seemed to have completely calmed down. He slowly sat on the chair next to Li Tianlan. "Riker, you're right. But not enough." Li Tianlan said slowly, "Xianxia State needs a dog that's obedient enough." "It's you who needs a dog that's obedient enough, isn't it?" Carlos looked at Li Tianlan and asked sarcastically. Li Tianlan smiled and did not speak. Carlos was silent for a while and said softly, "Will I die tonight?" His tone was subtle and complicated. Li Tianlan looked at him for a while and then said blandly, "Any last words?" Divine Emperor of Nine Heavens. Chapter 464. Carlos was silent for a long time. The situation in Wulan State changed in a day. He had thought of many endings and different endings. But before Li Tianlan stepped into the conference room, he did not think that he would die. Permanent darkness. Great shame. Monstrous infamy. All of this would fall on him with his death, followed by a series of words that did not sound good, such as cowardice, incompetence, greed, and stupidity. His life, his reputation, and everything about him would be completely polluted and painted black, and there would be no possibility of washing it. In such a case, the so-called last words, "Is it meaningful?" Carlos asked. "It's meaningless." Li Tianlan shook his head. "But before you die, if you are willing to say something, I can be a listener." This was the only thing Li Tianlan could do. He needed a very significant death to calm the great changes in Wulan State and completely nail the Jiang family of South America. The withdrawal of the Jiang family of South America. The advance of Xianxia State. The compromise and concession of Wulan State. All the crimes, all the inside stories, and all the shame needed to be borne by someone. President Carlos was the best candidate. His death would make everyone, including the people of Wulan State, have to accept the strong entry of the Snowdance Corps of Xianxia State into Wulan State. At the same time, it could also eliminate some pressure of international public opinion. Li Tianlan had no grudge against Carlos. But now the general trend wanted him to die. He could only die. "Do you dare to kill me?" Carlos stared into Li Tianlan's eyes. Death was close at hand, but it did not come. The tension lingering between life and death was like a hot torrent, rushing into his abdomen, all the way up his abdomen, and squeezing into his mind. Carlos's body was trembling slightly, and his eyes were red. "Jiang Qiansong killed you." Li Tianlan whispered, "I tried to save you, but I didn't succeed. You were attacked and sacrificed by the Jiang family of South America, and I saved Wulan State at the most critical moment." "But they're all lies. They're vulnerable." Carlos yelled. "Lies are good for ruling." Li Tianlan's voice was full of indifference. "You despicable, cruel, shameless, hypocritical invader." Carlos' breathing became more and more rapid. "You deserve to die. Mr. President, please pay attention to your words. His Highness and the Xianxia State represented by His Highness are eternal friends of Wulan State." Prime Minister Riker walked over with a wooden tray. On the tray was a cup of warm coffee and a steak made by the Prime Minister himself. Rick respectfully placed the tray in front of Li Tianlan. He turned around and looked into Carlos's eyes, which were burning with anger. He was extremely calm. "You can say whatever you want." Li Tianlan cut a piece of steak and put it into his mouth. He lost a lot of blood after being seriously injured. He just dealt with the wound briefly and then came to the office of the president. Now his body was getting colder and colder, and he could hardly taste anything in his mouth. He bit the beef seriously and said calmly, "But I want to correct you too. From now on, the Snowdance Corps and I are not friends of Wulan State, but rulers." Prime Minister Riker's body stiffened slightly for a moment, and then he said respectfully, "Your Highness is right." "Prime Minister." Carlos's voice was twisted and crazed. "You're wrong again," Li Tianlan said calmly. "He is not the Prime Minister." Carlos glanced at Li Tianlan and sneered without saying a word. Li Tianlan nodded and took out a very ordinary pistol from his pocket. "It seems that you have nothing to say." He raised his hand and threw the gun to Prime Minister Riker. He threw the gun to Prime Minister Riker, but he said in another capacity, "President Riker, kill him." Riker's whole body shook. He caught the pistol, and his arms couldn't help trembling. Li Tianlan took out his mobile phone and aimed it at the two of them. He turned on the video mode, and then focused on the stake in front of him. "This stake is not big enough." His soft voice echoed in the conference room, like the whisper of the devil. "If you don't kill him before I finish eating, I will kill you too." Riker's violently trembling palm held the pistol tightly and subconsciously aimed at Carlos. Carlos's face was pale, but his eyes were still burning with anger when he looked at Riker. Riker's arm trembled like a convulsion. At this moment, he might be holding the unprecedented sin in his life. But at the same time, as long as he pulled the trigger, he would get the power that he had never touched in his life. "I'm sorry." Riker's voice was a little hoarse. It sounded ferocious and empty in the claustrophobic conference room. Behind him was the sound of the knife and fork rubbing against the porcelain plate, which sounded extremely evil. Riker took a step forward. The muzzle was against Carlos's forehead. In the clear sound, Li Tianlan put down the knife and fork. The pistol with a silencer made a dull sound. The powerful bullet directly smashed Carlos's head. Fresh blood gushed to the ceiling like a crimson fountain, incomparably beautiful. Red blood beads splashed out and splashed on the plate in front of Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan took a sip of coffee, picked up his mobile phone and looked at the video. He nodded and said, "It's very clear. Do you want to have a look, Mr. President?" Riker, who was covered in blood, shook his head with a pale face. He opened his mouth and finally couldn't help but retch. He held the trash can in the conference room and vomited. Li Tianlan waited for him to finish vomiting before he ordered, "There is a star flag of Xianxia State outside the conference room. Before dawn, I want to see it hung in the highest and most obvious position in Wulan City." Riker, who was weak but had an abnormal blush on his face, nodded and said in a trembling voice, "As you wish, Your Highness." Li Tianlan nodded and put away the mobile phone that had recorded the scene just now. He casually touched Riker's head and said expressionlessly, "Do a good job. I have high hopes for you." It was not until they entered the highest hotel in Reki City and entered the luxury suite that Wang Tianzong, who had been silent all the way, took the initiative to break the silence and asked, "Do you blame me?" King Tong, who had been following Wang Tianzong silently, shook her head. "I didn't know that Li Tianlan had two murderous weapons." Wang Tianzong gave an extremely rare explanation. King Tong said, looking extremely docile. Wang Tianzong turned around and walked to the balcony of the room, looking at the brightly lit Reki City in the night. Among the countless lights, a building not far away was particularly bright. It was wrapped in light and looked extremely majestic. That was the office of the president, the power center of Wulan State. At this moment, Li Tianlan should be there. Wang Tianzong looked in that direction with a calm face. "He's very good." King Tong stood behind Wang Tianzong. Her emotions seemed to have completely adjusted, or perhaps she had deliberately suppressed them. "No wonder Yue Tong likes him." Wang Tianzong nodded. "But he deserves to die." King Tong reached out and touched her red lips. Her red lips were full and enchanting, but there was still the coldness and the taste of death that belonged to murderous weapons between her lips and teeth. King Tong narrowed her eyes, and a shocking evil spirit suddenly flashed in her golden eyes. Wang Tianzong nodded again. However, King Tong clearly felt that the other party was not perfunctory, but was saying this very seriously. If Li Tianlan didn't hold back his sword tonight, what would have happened? King Tong suddenly asked. Li Tianlan's martial arts was the real road of the chosen one. In terms of level, his sword intent was better than Wang Tianzong, Deity, and Lin Fengting. However, his sword energy was not enough, and his power was not strong enough for the time being. But tonight, Deity's sword energy and Li Tianlan's sword intent were combined. That was equivalent to the fusion of the Chosen One's sword intent and the sword energy of the peak of the Invincible Realm. Their swordsmanship was of the same origin. This was almost equivalent to the sword that Li Tianlan stabbed when he entered the peak of the Invincible Realm. Wang Tianzong was very strong. But at that time, he was unprepared. If he didn't hold back that sword, the possibility of Wang Tianzong being seriously injured in an instant was infinitely close to 100%. What would have happened then? King Tong suddenly felt a sense of fear in her heart. It's hard to say. Wang Tianzong was silent for a while and said blandly, if he had attacked with all his strength, he would have died, Deity would have died, and I would have been seriously injured. The possibility of breaking through again would have been zero, and I might even have fallen into the Invincible Realm. At that time, the chaos in Eastern Europe would have nothing to do with the Wang family of Beihai or Zhongzhou state. Beihai could get most of the benefits of the Li family and the giant group, but Beihai would also have to face countless people who would hit him when he was down. This was undoubtedly a very complicated consequence. And with so many complications added up, it was really hard to say what the final result would be. However, King Tong heard something different from this answer. She felt a little incredible and couldn't help but widen her eyes. Do you mean that you still have the possibility of continuing to break through? Now Wang Tianzong had surpassed the peak of the Invincible Realm. If he broke through again, he could only be the chosen one. There was a flash of surprise in King Tong's eyes. Can you still break through at your age? Wang Tianzong shook his head and then nodded. Above the peak of the Invincible Realm, it has nothing to do with age. To be exact, martial arts has little to do with age. The age of 40 is a recognized threshold. But over the years, there have been people who have broken through to the Invincible Realm at the age of 40. They are very few. But as long as there is one, even if there is one, it is enough to explain the problem. As for my current state, I can't describe it in detail. But now it's a very critical time. I'm not sure if I can take the last step. At present, I still need an opportunity. No wonder, King Tong murmured, no wonder you didn't do anything tonight. Wang Tianzong was about to break through. In this case, he naturally had to maintain the peak state and silently look for his own opportunity. Not entirely for this reason. Wang Tianzong said, in today's dark world, I can confirm that I am the strongest. But I am also sure that I am not invincible. This sentence was very heavy and bitter. Wang Tianzong was indeed the strongest, but he was not so strong that no one could pose a threat to him, so he didn't do anything tonight. If he took the last half step in martial arts tonight, even if he didn't do anything to Li Tianlan, at least Deity wouldn't be able to leave anyway. Wang Tianzong sighed softly, and there was a flash of unwillingness in his eyes. I believe in you. You can definitely take the last step, King Tong said softly. King Tong said softly. Her golden pupils were shining with undisguised worship and admiration, which were brilliant and charming. Wang Tianzong smiled and looked at the brightly lit office of the president in his sight. He was silent for a long time. The deadlock in Eastern Europe has been broken. After a long time, he said slowly. A cell phone suddenly rang. Wang Tianzong took out his cell phone and looked at it. It was a very short message, but the content was not simple. General Joel is dead. Wang Tianzong raised his eyebrows in surprise. He looked at his cell phone, and there seemed to be wind and clouds gathering in his eyes. After the deadlock, there is still a deadlock. He put away his cell phone and shook his head. It's really boring. This was the price that the losing side had to pay after losing the war. Zhongzhou state would not talk to Wulan state in a short time. There was no doubt that Zhongzhou state itself needed to negotiate internally on how to divide up Wulan state. Perhaps in a few days, countless money would flow into Zhongzhou state from Wulan state as war reparations. Meanwhile, Countless wealthy families, military forces, and dark forces in Zhongzhou state would pour in quietly and become the most powerful class in this country. The future was completely predictable. Therefore, it seemed exceptionally cruel. Rick's vision was a little dizzy. He forced himself to stand up straight, but his head was buzzing. Li Tianlan still sat there quietly, motionless. A phone suddenly rang, and it sounded a little ear-piercing in the silent conference room. Rick's body trembled. He found his phone in a daze and looked at the caller ID. There was a name on the caller ID. General Dessa. The name was familiar. But Rick, who was completely confused, couldn't remember who it was for a while. Rick's mouth twitched, and he tried to think of the so-called general. The phone continued to ring, and it seemed to be getting more and more urgent, which made people panic. "Don't answer it," Li Tianlan suddenly said. His body didn't move, and his tone was very light, but extremely tough. Rick, who was about to answer the phone subconsciously, suddenly remembered who General Dessa was. General Dessa of Wulan State, the head of the military in the southwest. In the southwest of Wulan State, it bordered Oga State. In other words, today, the 3,000 elites of the Snowdance Corps swept all the way. They were swept by several large elite corps under the command of General Dessa. Rick's face was pale and bloodless, because he suddenly remembered that the Snowdance Corps that set off from to Wulan State was not only 3,000 people. It was 5,000. 3,000 lightly armed people marched forward quickly. In the rear, there were 2,000 heavy firepower troops armed to the teeth with a large number of weapons. How big was the difference between 3,000 lightly armed elites and 2,000 fully armed elites? How big was the gap between Zhongzhou State and Wulan State in terms of armaments? If he guessed correctly, this was the time when several elite corps of Wulan State gathered the defeated troops. At the same time, it was also the time when more than 2,000 heavily armed elites of the Snowdance Corps entered Wulan State. Rick held his phone. His heart suddenly became colder than ever. "Your Highness," he called out in a trembling tone. Li Tianlan said calmly, "Give me the phone." "Your Highness." Rick's tone suddenly became excited. "We can't give up the several corps in the southwest. Without them, how can Wulan State defend? The defense of Wulan State has the Snowdance Corps. What are you afraid of?" Li Tianlan said in a cold tone. Rick only felt that a deadly rope was tightly wrapped around his neck, and he had no hope of breaking free. His legs were weak, and he finally knelt on the ground. "Your Highness," he hadn't finished speaking. In his sight, Li Tianlan reached out his hand. His palm trembled slightly, but he quickly took off the translator hanging on his ear without hesitation. Then he reached out and slowly pointed to the phone in Rick's hand. Rick's eyes became completely desperate. Li Tianlan didn't understand foreign languages. He didn't even understand basic English. Without the translator, Li Tianlan couldn't understand what he was saying. The phone stopped ringing for a while. Then it rang again. The melodious ringtone sounded like thousands of ghosts screaming and roaring in Rick's ears at this time. His heart was extremely tormented. The phone kept ringing for a full 10 minutes. Then the phone didn't ring again. 10 minutes was a long time. But it was also very short. If this gap was on the battlefield, it would be so big that it would make people desperate. Rick completely broke down and burst into tears. In these 10 minutes, he didn't know what the situation of the battle was, but at least he could know what would happen to the corps directly led by General Dessa. The door of the conference room was pushed open. Cool breeze and drifting cloud came in with faint bloodstains on their bodies. Li Tianlan looked at them motionlessly. Cool breeze nodded to Li Tianlan and said softly, "Your Highness, it's all done." Li Tianlan smiled. Tonight, in the hearts of the Snowdance Corps, he was the invincible god of war. In the eyes of Wulan State, cool breeze and drifting cloud were absolute gods of death. In just a few hours, more than 30 high-level officials of Wulan State or people with great influence in a certain field died in the dark edge of Sai City. It was not until this moment that Li Tianlan really controlled Reki City. As for controlling the entire Wulan State, it was destined to take a long time. Li Tianlan glanced at Rick, who was in a daze, and his eyes were slightly mocking. "You think it's unacceptable? You think I completely gave up the war force in the southeast of Wulan State. You think I killed a lot of high-level officials tonight. But don't you think about whether those things that seem to belong to Wulan State are in Wulan State with other positions or really belong to Wulan State? For example, General Joel just now. If he doesn't die tonight, I won't come tonight. After the chaos in Eastern Europe is over, do you know whether Wulan State's surname is Jiang, Wang, or something else? Is there any difference now? Rick asked with a sad smile. Of course there's a difference, Li Tianlan said calmly. At least we can be sure of one thing now. Wulan State surnamed Li. Rick sat on the ground, looking dull. Your Highness, the situation outside is under control. Lu Yun reminded him without batting an eyelid. Li Tianlan nodded and looked at Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud for a long time. His body was motionless. Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud's faces changed at the same time. They glanced at Rick and walked toward Li Tianlan calmly. Li Tianlan laughed. His face was very young, but his smile was very desolate, with extreme exhaustion and trance. Your Highness. Cool Breeze subconsciously reached out his hand. Li Tianlan grabbed Cool Breeze's arm and held it tightly. He used a lot of strength. But Cool Breeze couldn't feel the slightest strength. He could only feel that Li Tianlan's arm was trembling, but he still wanted to grasp something. In an instant, Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud were both in a cold sweat. They missed the final battle before the Rekvia castle. They also didn't witness Li Tianlan's choice and advance and retreat when he was sandwiched between Deity and Wang Tianzong. So they didn't know how Li Tianlan's injury was. But now it seemed that Li Tianlan had no strength at all. That was to say, it had been a long time before they came. Rick, who didn't know any martial arts, might be able to kill Li Tianlan easily if he was more courageous. Not to mention resisting, it was extremely difficult for Li Tianlan to even move. Cool Breeze glanced at the pistol beside Rick. Drifting Cloud took off a button from his clothes, crushed it, and fed some of the powder to Li Tianlan. The standard healing medicine for high-level officials in Zhongzhou State had been used up, and even if it was given to Li Tianlan now, it wouldn't work. What Drifting Cloud fed Li Tianlan was something that could cheer him up in a short time. In layman's terms, it was a powerful stimulant for military use. This kind of thing was bound to bring a certain degree of damage to the body, and even cause Li Tianlan's injury to be more serious. But now Li Tianlan had to stand up. The future god of war of Zhongzhou State. Under any circumstances, he couldn't retreat. He couldn't fall down. The dry powder gradually melted. A sickly blush flashed across Li Tianlan's face. His palm gradually gained strength. Letting go of Cool Breeze's hand, he slowly stood up and said in a dead and hoarse voice, "Let's go and raise the flag." Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud subconsciously wanted to help him. Li Tianlan shook his head and walked out of the conference room. His steps were slow, but when he tried to control his body, his steps were extremely steady. Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud followed Li Tianlan closely to prevent him from suddenly falling down. They could only see Li Tianlan's back in their sight. That back was so lonely, heavy and slow, as if he was carrying the whole world on his back. But what he carried on his shoulders, Ingrua's shoulders, was not just a world. The office of the president was not the tallest place in Reki City. But there was the tallest flagpole in Reki City in front of the gate of the office of the president. In this extremely open area, the flag of Wulan province flying day and night was the most eye-catching symbol. When Li Tianlan walked out of the office of the president with Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud, it was almost late at night, and there was almost a sea of people outside the office of the president. The flashes of the cameras were constantly flashing, and the police cars were maintaining order. Reporters from all countries stationed in Wulan State swarmed there after receiving the notice. Li Tianlan's appearance did not attract the attention of any reporter. He did not wear a military uniform. He wore a temporary black suit without a military rank. No one knew that the young man who passed by them was the marshal of the Snowdance Corps of Zhongzhou State. All the cameras were focused on Li Zhonghu. To be exact, they were gathered on the huge star flag in Li Zhonghu's hand. The scene was busy and silent. The star flag became the most dazzling in the night sky. Color. Hundreds of elites of the Snowdance Corps lined up neatly on the square in front of the office of the president. The whole night seemed to be filled with the fierce fighting intent that had not dissipated. Li Tianlan walked into the crowd calmly and looked at the gate of the office of the president quietly. He was waiting for Rieker. Everyone was waiting for Rieker. As a veteran politician who had been in politics for decades, Li Tianlan completely believed in Rieker's psychological quality and believed that he could adjust his state in the shortest time. At least, he could cope with the current situation. Cool breeze whispered in his ear the number of media present at this moment. All the media were informed through the channels of Samsara Palace in Eastern Europe. Nearly 40 media outlets were informed. Now there were more than 35 media outlets present, most of which were foreign media. Li Tianlan remained calm. Tonight, he wanted to let the star flag of Xianxia State flutter in Eastern Europe and in front of the office of the president in Wulan State, the most sensitive geographical location, under the eyes of the whole world. Li Tianlan watched this scene quietly. His vision had become a little blurred, but in his sight, the red color of the star flag was still breathtaking. The front door of the office of the president was slowly pulled open. The reporters, who had been silent all the time, suddenly burst into a hubbub. The flashes finally began to shift from the star flag. Countless reporters rushed over crazily. Rieker, the Prime Minister of Wulan State, walked out of the office of the president with a pale face and some tears on his face. His face was solemn and heavy. "Mr. Prime Minister, Reki City is very unfortunate today. Is all this really related to Xianxia State? Should Xianxia State take full responsibility for this? Mr. Prime Minister, has Wulan State completely severed diplomatic relations with Xianxia State? Do you have any views on the future development of the two countries? Mr. Prime Minister, why didn't Mr. President show up? Crazy flashing lights. All kinds of questions. Faces with different expressions kept flashing in front of Rieker. This press conference was not formal, but it was very effective. It was enough to spread to all corners of the world in the shortest time. So Rieker knew very well that from this moment on, every word he said would resound all over the world. At this moment, he suddenly thought of a sentence. Tell a big lie and let the whole world dance with it. Rieker suddenly laughed at himself. He did want to tell a big lie recently and let the whole world dance with it, but he would also dance with it. The young and ambitious man who was watching coldly behind the wall of the big lie was not him. Everyone. Rieker took a deep breath, took the microphone and said slowly, "Before answering your questions, I would like to announce a very regrettable thing first. Mr. President Carlos, the greatest and wisest leader of Wulan State, my former best friend, my former life mentor, and the person I once respected the most, has sacrificed himself." There was a sudden silence in front of the office of the president, leaving only the sound of the wind. The next second, an incredible exclamation exploded like an ignited gunpowder keg. Everyone was thinking and asking the same question. Did Xianxia State do it? It's a misunderstanding. Rieker said seriously, Wulan State and Xianxia State have always been friends. It's just that Wulan State was used today, which led to Wulan State's irrational behavior of declaring war on a friend. If time could go back, I would definitely stop this from happening. Mr. Prime Minister, what's the misunderstanding? Well, maybe we have to find the reason from Mr. President. There are many things between him and the Jiang family of South America that need to be investigated and collected evidence. We all need time. Mr. President? My God, how is this possible? You just said that he was the person you respected the most. Yes, he used to be. The square in front of the office of the president was completely crazy. Countless reporters almost screamed and asked questions. Li Tianlan could no longer hear it clearly. The last thing he vaguely heard was the national anthem of Xianxia State that sounded in the land of Eastern Europe. Li Zhonghu held the star flag tightly in his hand and sent it to the most dazzling place in Reki City. The red flag kept fluttering in the night wind and became the most dazzling color in the night sky. It was the early morning of August 8th in Eastern Europe. The day known as the date of death finally passed. Reki City, which had been in chaos for a day, announced several pieces of news to the world. President Carlos was suspected of treason and had secret cooperation with the Jiang family of South America. The Jiang family of South America and Carlos took advantage of Wulan state and almost destroyed the friendly diplomatic relationship between Wulan state and Zhongzhou state. The cooperation between Carlos and the Jiang family of South America broke down. Jiang Qiansong, the patriarch of the Jiang family of South America, became angry and killed Carlos. He even wanted to kill all the high-level officials of Wulan state. At the critical moment, Marshal Li Tianlan of the Snowdance Corps of Zhongzhou state appeared and stopped the bottomless conspiracy of the Jiang family of South America. Zhongzhou state and Wulan state would always be best friends, and Marshal Li Tianlan was the most respected hero of Wulan state. In order to ensure the safety of Wulan state, Prime Minister Riker sincerely invited the Snowdance Corps of Zhongzhou state to be stationed in Reki City for a period of time. Countless pieces of news exploded all over the world like bombs. 20 hours ago, Li Tianlan was a warmonger, an invader, and a madman. Zhongzhou state was under great pressure because of this. 20 hours later, Li Tianlan became the hero of Wulan state, and Zhongzhou state became the best friend of Wulan state. In less than a day's time, the situation had almost been completely reversed. At this moment, on the land of Wulan state, Li Tianlan and Zhongzhou state were shining at the same time. This was a real upheaval. The grand and clear national anthem of Zhongzhou state resounded throughout Wulan city with the fluttering star flag that night. In the seemingly never-ending song, Li Tianlan looked at the increasingly blurred red flag in his sight and whispered, "Cool breeze." "I'm here, Your Highness." Cool breeze bowed slightly and said respectfully. Li Tianlan pointed to the direction where the flag was fluttering and said hoarsely, "This is my flag." "Yes, Your Highness." Cool breeze replied in a firm tone. "This is my flag. It is also my country." Divine Emperor of Nine Heavens. Chapter 466. In the huge square in front of the office of the president, the national anthem of Zhongzhou state sounded all night. The bright red and gorgeous star flag flew in the passionate music and was reflected in the eyes of the media all over the world, like the only color in the night. The blood in the city gradually dried up, and the raging fire began to extinguish. The war and turmoil gradually subsided as the night passed. The bright and bustling lights went out one by one, and the glimmer lit up in the deepest darkness. A gust of morning wind blew away the darkness, and the hazy dawn was a little wet. The rain dripped down, and the whole city was cold. Wang Tianzong stood on the balcony of the hotel all night, and the star flag in front of the office of the president also fluttered in his pupils all night. The rain, which was getting heavier, fell on his head and soaked the extremely luxurious open-air balcony. Wang Tianzong, who was motionless like a statue, suddenly raised his head and looked at the sky. The sky was gloomy. The rain was messy. The whole world was cold and desolate. Wang Tianzong took a deep breath. There was no sword intent around him, and there was no fluctuation in the space. Under his extremely natural gaze, the sky hundreds of meters around him suddenly calmed down, and all the rain was completely evaporated. He stood on the balcony, surrounded by falling rain, but the place where he stood was dry and warm. The sound of footsteps came from behind him. King Tong, who had just gotten up, walked over in her pajamas. She handed Wang Tianzong a glass of warm water and whispered, "It's raining." Wang Tianzong nodded, took the water glass, and drank some water. "You didn't sleep all night?" King Tong asked. After a night's sleep, King Tong's mental state had completely recovered from the frustration of last night. She was no longer afraid and shocked, but this morning, King Tong was not as arrogant, enchanting, and powerful as she used to be. In front of Wang Tianzong, King Tong had never been a queen. Her eyes were fixed on Wang Tianzong's face, and she looked a little charming and gorgeous. Wang Tianzong shook his head. "I'm not sleepy." Last night, King Tong slept in his room while he stood on the balcony all night. "I just got up. Would you like to go to sleep?" King Tong blinked and invited him with a chuckle, looking ambiguous. Wang Tianzong might have been used to this kind of ambiguity, so he was indifferent and acted as if he hadn't heard it and didn't give any response. What does the Shadow Throne plan to do next? Wang Tianzong put the quilt on the balcony. The rain curtain all over the sky began to shrink slowly. The rain fell into the cup, bringing about ripples. But the place where they stood was still dry and warm. I want to stay in Reki City. King Tong thought for a while and said. Although she had suffered great humiliation last night, she had to stay in Reki City, no matter from the development of the situation or from the standpoint of wanting to get back at them. You can stay, but you can't do anything for the time being. Wang Tianzong said slowly. King Tong was a little confused. The great change in Reki City happened in a hurry, and the Shadow Throne did not have time to mobilize too much power at all. That was why King Tong came alone, and in the end, she ended up in an extremely embarrassing situation. But King Tong did not lose confidence. She did not rank high on the divine list, but the Shadow Throne, which was supported by many European powers and wealthy families, could definitely be said to be one of the most terrifying superpowers in the world. If she brought this power to any place, it would be enough to change the general trend. As I said, after the stalemate, there will be another stalemate. Wang Tianzong narrowed his eyes. Wulan State had always been a sore point of Zhongzhou State. Moreover, the special geographical location of this country had always been a coveted target of all the major forces. The Wang family of Beihai had been secretly operating in Wulan State for several years. General Zhou, whose influence in the military of Wulan State was second only to General Tostel, was the most important pawn of the Wang family of Beihai in Wulan State. But General Zhou was dead. Wang Tianzong didn't get the news until it was close to early morning. General Zhou was not the only one who died. Some of General Zhou's trusted subordinates were all assassinated. In other words, all the contacts of the Wang family of Beihai that had been secretly operating in Wulan State for many years had almost been wiped out. It was straightforward, neat, precise, and decisive. It was Sai City who did it. Wang Tianzong didn't doubt the ability of Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud. The deterrent power of assassins at their level was no less than that of ordinary invincible realm experts under certain circumstances. They could definitely do it. But Wang Tianzong didn't understand where they got such a precise list. All the foundations of the Wang family of Beihai in Wulan State were cut off and destroyed overnight, leaving almost nothing. How precise must that list be in order to achieve this kind of effect? This feeling was like the information that Qin Weibai handed to Summer Solstice during the final maneuver of the Sky Academy. There were some things that Wang Tianzong was not the only one who knew. But those who knew these things had no reason or position to betray him at all. So no matter how he looked at it, there was no possibility of these materials being leaked. So how did Li Tianlan know this list? Wang Tianzong took a deep breath and muttered to himself, I can't be quiet and I can't move. This feeling is really uncomfortable? King Tong asked. Wang Tianzong nodded. Yes. Everything at the moment was a stalemate for Wang Tianzong. He was now the strongest sword emperor in the dark world, but in the real general trend, he would inevitably become the target that everyone wanted to kill. As he said, he was the strongest, and everyone knew it. But he was not absolutely invincible, and everyone knew it. His sword might tear the current situation into pieces, but if he acted rashly, he could kill Deity and Li Tianlan. Lin Fengting was no match for him, and neither was Arcis. He could do it. But once he did it, the final winner would not be the Wang family of Beihai. The Dark World was the cruelest and darkest Jianghu. In Jianghu, one could be happy and free? It was all bullshit. The major forces were constantly overturning. The conflicts between the major forces were never for killing. Killing was just a necessary means, not the end. The purpose of all the forces was for interests. How could the major forces, who were entangled by interests, talk about being free and unfettered? This was a very obvious matter. Wang Tianzong was stronger than anyone, but if he killed someone and got no benefits, it would be meaningless. He was stronger than anyone, so he could kill Deity. If he went all out, he could even kill Lin Fengting. In today's dark world, only these two people could pose a fatal threat to him. He could get rid of these two threats. But after getting rid of these two threats, in his seriously injured state, maybe all the invincible realm experts would become his new threats. There were more and more threats. The trouble was getting bigger and bigger. In the end, what he could get was failure, an extremely tragic failure. This was not what Wang Tianzong wanted. He just wanted to win. "What are you going to do?" King Tong asked. "I don't know." Wang Tianzong shook his head. "At present, there are only two ways. One is to wait for the right time to appear. The other is to break through and go further." General Zhou's team was originally an important bargaining chip for the Wang family of Beihai to promote the situation in Wulan State and even Eastern Europe. Even if Li Tianlan occupied Eastern Europe now, as long as he had Zhou, Wang Tianzong could also create many opportunities. But Zhou was dead. Without a bargaining chip, it was difficult for Wang Tianzong to do anything inside Wulan State in a short time. And he did not dare to make a move now. When the Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou State did not make a move, he was at his strongest. At this time, there would only be a few threats around him. But once he made a move, he might be surrounded by threats. So he could only wait for other forces to make a move, and then make a move at the most perfect time to get the benefits he wanted the most. Or wait for his own breakthrough. He could make a breakthrough at any time. As long as he completely broke through the invincible realm and reached that new realm, he could sweep the entire dark world by himself. At that time, the Wang family of Beihai would not need any conspiracy, and it would ignore any conspiracy. The sharpness of the listen to the sea sword was unbridled. Wherever the sword light passed, it was either surrender or death. Only the invincible realm was invincible. If he could break through again, all the deadlocks would be meaningless in his eyes. Wang Tianzong looked at the rainy sky and did not speak for a long time. Now he wanted to move, but there was no right opportunity. He could not move and did not dare to move. He wanted to be quiet and wait for his breakthrough. But how could he really calm down when the situation in Eastern Europe was changing? He could not be quiet or move. The movement could only make his heart more and more chaotic. "Let me do it," King Tong suddenly said. Her voice was very erratic. The three short words suddenly became firm in the end. Wang Tianzong glanced at her. "How about the Shadow Throne make a move first?" King Tong said. Since it was a deadlock, it proved that there was no chance for the time being. But the opportunity would come sooner or later. The deadlock would be broken sooner or later. All of this was uncontrollable. In this case, the Shadow Throne would be the one to break the deadlock. At least, it could control some of the initial situations, which was also an advantage. Of course, all of this was from the standpoint of the Wang family of Beihai. King Tong took the Shadow Throne to break the deadlock. She could only try her best to create a result that was beneficial to Wang Tianzong. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Wang Tianzong shook his head. All of this seemed to be good for Wang Tianzong. But he and King Tong both knew that when all the superpowers in the dark world were involved, whoever couldn't help but take the initiative to make a move first was more likely to be the first to be eliminated. The Jiang family of South America and Knights Templars were the first to make a move in Eastern Europe. Now the two invincible realm experts of the Jiang family of South America had died, and their vitality had been greatly damaged. Jiang Qiansong had left a lot of chips and left in dismay. The entire Jiang family of South America would even end up being beaten by everyone. As for Knights Templars, Chaos, the chief of Knights, also died without a whole body. As a branch of the Vatican in the Dark World, once Chaos died, the meaning of the existence of the entire Knights Templars would be greatly reduced. Unless the Vatican could find another invincible realm expert with firm belief, Knights Templars would almost be useless. Without an absolutely good opportunity and absolute certainty, who would dare to make a move? "It's not nonsense," King Tong said seriously. "I thought about it all night. This is the best way." "Those European giants won't agree," Wang Tianzong said. The Queen of the Shadow Throne was respected in the Shadow Throne. She was the master, but she could not be a dictator. No matter how powerful Rothschild was, it was impossible to forcibly reverse the will of all the giants in Western Europe. England, France, Germany, Italy, Which country did not have a rich and powerful family with a long history? In terms of inheritance time, some giants even existed earlier than the Wang family of Beihai. Rothschild was much stronger than any giant. But when all the giants united, they became a force that could overturn the whole of Europe. No matter how strong Rothschild was, it did not have the strength to suppress such a force. The most important thing was that the Shadow Throne had no reason to do so. They were partners and close allies. But no one in the dark world liked to sacrifice themselves to illuminate others. I'll convince them. King Tong looked straight at Wang Tianzong's face. I'm very sober now. It's my decision to let the Shadow Throne take the lead, but it's not just because I like it. Do you understand? She took action not only because of her admiration for Wang Tianzong. There were other reasons. Because she was the queen of the Shadow Throne. Tell me your reason. Wang Tianzong turned and walked into the living room of the hotel suite. He sat on the sofa in the living room and turned on the TV. The TV was the channel of Wulan State. All channels were broadcasting the scene in front of the office of the president. The Scarlet Star flag fluttered proudly in front of the office of the president. On this day, the whole Wulan State and even the whole world were rebuking the madness of the Jiang family of South America. Wang Tianzong watched quietly. In many cases, the truth of the dark world was not important at all. What mattered was the general trend. The Jiang family of South America had lost the general trend. So, in addition to the chaos in Eastern Europe, the Jiang family of South America had also become the target of everyone's attacks and interests. As for whether Jiang Qiansong had killed President Carlos or not, who would care? Who would? The only reason is that I believe in you. King Tong hesitated. She wanted to sit next to Wang Tianzong, but in the end, she sat opposite him. She looked into his eyes, and her eyes were a little blurred. You're the strongest man in this era. There's nothing you can't do. I believe in that. If you say you can break through, you can definitely break through. Tianzong, I'm looking forward to that day. In my heart, there should be no obstacles in front of the Wang family of Beihai, and the sword of Beihai should not have any scruples. I always remember what Uncle Wang said to me when I first climbed Mount Dibing when I was a child. Only those who can be unscrupulous can be sharp. Wang Tianzong was in a daze. Only those who could be unscrupulous could be sharp. This was the Wang family of Beihai more than 20 years ago. At that time, the Wang family of Beihai was invincible in the world. Its sharpness shocked the world and was unparalleled in the world. The sword of the Wang family of Beihai was truly unscrupulous and arbitrary. That was the strongest sharpness. However, the sharpness that was enough to tear the whole world had completely disappeared more than 20 years ago. The Wang family of Beihai was still the strongest superpower in the dark world today. But it was no longer invincible. No matter how many reasons were behind all this, at least the reality was obvious. After Wang Tianzong became the patriarch, the Wang family of Beihai lost its unscrupulous confidence. He was the sword emperor and ranked first on the divine list. But the Wang family of Beihai, which was supported by him alone, did not return to its former peak state after all. He gave everything and burned himself desperately, but he could clearly sense that the Wang family of Beihai was slowly declining from its peak. The speed of this decline was very slow, but it really existed. No emotion could describe the anxiety and pressure in Wang Tianzong's heart. Even Summer Solstice did not know that her husband was tired and silent when he checked whether he could still stand straight in the mirror. Because in the eyes of the world, he was the Sword Emperor. He could only be the Sword Emperor. But in this era, the Sword Emperor was not invincible. It's different. Wang Tianzong whispered. His voice was very soft. It's different from that time. He had broken through the invincible realm with one foot. Even before the breakthrough, Wang Tianzong could be regarded as the strongest patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai in the past 100 years. At this moment, the strength of his swordsmanship had completely surpassed his father's. But the old patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai was much calmer than him. That was why he said that the unscrupulous was the sharpness. Wang Tianzong clearly remembered how heroic his father was when he said this sentence in those days. Because at that time, the Wang family of Beihai still owned the Li family. The Li family also owned the Wang family of Beihai. When the two stood side by side in Zhongzhou state, it was the unscrupulous and invincible sharpness. But now, it was different. Wang Tianzong even thought more than once that if Li Tianlan could let go of some ambitions, if Li Tianlan and Wang Shengxiao could stand side by side in the next few decades, what would the Wang family of Beihai and Li Tianlan look like at that time? But it seemed that imagination could only be imagination now. The Li family collapsed. It's true that the Wang family of Beihai no longer has the Li family, but there is still Rothschild. There seemed to be a golden flame burning in King Tong's eyes, which was extremely hot. I will convince all the wealthy families of the Shadow Throne that the Shadow Throne can pay a huge price. We will give up all the interests in Eastern Europe and bet on your breakthrough. Once you successfully take the last half step, the price that the Shadow Throne paid in Eastern Europe can be recovered in Western Europe. Wang Tianzong raised his eyebrows. Western Europe. Western Europe was the concentration of all the developed countries in Europe. That was the territory of the Shadow Throne. But now, King Tong wanted to recover all the interests in her own territory. Who was her target? Who else could it be? In the whole of Western Europe, there was only one force that could not be controlled by all the wealthy families and all the countries. The Holy Land. The Vatican. King Tong straightened up. Her figure was not as plump as that of Europeans. Instead, it was a little slender. But at this time, she stood there with an indescribable valiance. It should be recorded in the history of our two clans. In the past 500 years, there have been at least more than 200 years in the world. The Wang family of Beihai and Rothschild are playing the leading roles. That history was very long. But for such a huge family as Rothschild, everyone understood their history and their relationship with the Wang family of Beihai. In the heyday of the chosen one ancestor of the Wang family of Beihai, a female patriarch appeared in Rothschild. And the female patriarch gave birth to a child for the ancestor of the Wang family of Beihai. Then, in the flow of history, the ancestor of the Lin clan appeared. Then, the Lin clan hid from the world. The chosen one who founded Beihai passed away. Time surged forward like a huge wave. In that era and several eras, the extremely powerful Wang family of Beihai and Rothschild played the leading roles in the world. In the heyday of Rothschild, 2 popes of the Vatican came from this family. However, a change about 200 years ago almost completely overturned the situation in which Rothschild ruled Western Europe. The patriarch of Rothschild was assassinated. The patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai was seriously injured. In that era, a man named Monlier appeared in Western Europe. He was almost equivalent to Wang Tianzong in this era. However, he found a nearly perfect opportunity to completely break the situation that had lasted for a long time in Western Europe. In the end, he became the best and greatest pope of the Vatican in nearly 500 years. It was from that time that Rothschild, who had lost the Vatican, began to take another path. The Shadow Throne began to appear in Western Europe. During that period, in the most difficult time of the Wang family of Beihai and Rothschild, there was also a person named Li Xiuxin. He came to Zhongzhou state from Switzerland. That was the beginning and origin of the Li family. From that period to more than 20 years ago, the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family played the leading roles in the world. This history was recorded in the history of the Wang family of Beihai, in the history of Rothschild, and in the history of the Vatican. It was extremely clear. The memory was vivid. Wang Tianzong was silent for a long time. After losing the Li family, did the Wang family of Beihai want to restabilize its relationship with Rothschild and finally set foot on the top of the world again? The scene seemed beautiful. Wang Tianzong had no aversion to Rothschild. But that was not what he wanted. It was really not. This is the only choice at present. The Shadow Throne is also willing to give up the present and gamble on the future. King Tong looked at Wang Tianzong and said seriously. The only choice was that he had no choice. Wang Tianzong hated having no choice the most. He had now stepped into a new realm with 1 foot, and his sword intent had reached an unprecedented peak. Maybe in the next second, he might break through. After the breakthrough, he could choose whatever he wanted. But he still needed an opportunity. This opportunity could be the next second, or it could be the rest of his life. Now he was only a paper-thin distance away from the invincible realm. This piece of paper had become very transparent, but it had unparalleled willfulness. If there was no suitable opportunity, he might not be able to break through this layer of paper in his lifetime. Tianzong. King Tong called him in a very gentle voice. Wang Tianzong reached out and patted her palm. He said with a smile, "Don't worry. In addition to the Shadow Throne, I have another candidate who is more suitable to break the situation. Wait a little longer." How is it possible? King Tong was a little incredulous. The person who takes action first is destined to lose and even lose everything. Who will take action for you at this time? Of course, it's a person who has the ability to take action, but he has nothing. Wang Tianzong said calmly. Chapter 467. Wang Tianzong was talking about tyrants. Today, Eastern Europe was like a dark cloud hanging over the city. At the delicate moment when a storm was coming, there were at least 20 invincible realm experts gathered in Eastern Europe. 20 invincible realm experts. What did that mean? There were nearly 7 billion people in the world, and from the perspective of martial arts, the divine and holy lists represented the pinnacle of martial arts. 15 people on the divine list. There were 15 people on the holy roll. There were a total of 30 invincible realm experts. There were also a few who were not strong enough to be on the list. There were also people like Lin Fengting who hid their names. The total number of invincible realm experts in the world could not exceed 50. There were less than 50 invincible realm experts in a population of 7 billion. This number was much less than the number of heads of state in the world. In contrast, there were many half-step invincible realm experts who seemed to be only one step away from the real invincible realm. And there were many more thunder-shocking realm experts than half-step invincible realm experts. Fire-flaming realm experts, who could be regarded as super elites anywhere, were the main force of martial arts. Further down, the ice-condensing realm and chi-controlling realm were as vast as the sea, the cornerstone of martial arts. But compared with billions of ordinary people, the so-called ice-condensing realm and chi-controlling realm elites were also rare. It was hard to cross the threshold of martial arts. It was difficult to climb the martial path. It was as difficult as ascending the heavens. This also showed how precious the experts of the invincible realm were. Any invincible realm expert, no matter whether he was on the divine list or the holy list, or not qualified to be on the list, was a real big shot in the dark world. He was even a big shot who could protect a country. Now, the chaos in Eastern Europe had gathered the world's superpowers. There were also invincible realm experts who belonged to various powerful countries. At least 20 invincible realm experts gathered together. What did that mean? How majestic was the decisive battle in Tiandu 3 years ago? Only a few invincible realm experts showed up. This meant that Eastern Europe had gradually evolved into a chaos that the Dark World had never seen in nearly 100 years. The general trend formed by such a chaotic situation was overwhelming. Ice condensing, chi controlling, fire flaming, and thunder shocking, they had no right to resist at all. They could only go with the flow in the general trend. The peak of the thunder-shocking realm and the half-step invincible realm could play a role. But in the deadlock, only an invincible realm expert could really break the deadlock. Now there was only one invincible realm expert in the entire Dark World. He had nothing. Perhaps in the future, Jiang Qiansong would also be included. But now, there was only one. An expert on the divine list, the former leader of the Polar Ground Alliance, Tyrant. This condition was too difficult, and the screening range was too small, so King Tong easily thought of this candidate. Tyrant? She asked. Yes. Wang Tianzong nodded. The indefinite grace I borrowed from you was prepared for Tyrant. King Tong thought for a moment and asked, Where is Tyrant? I'm still looking. I've found some clues, so let's wait a little longer. Wang Tianzong said. He now had great hopes of breaking through, and he had Tyrant as an alternative to break the deadlock. Naturally, he did not want the Shadow Throne to fight desperately. Even if the Wang family of Beihai did not advance and retreat at the same time as Rothschild, their relationship was always close. Whenever there was a dispute in the Dark World, they were each other's best allies. If the Shadow Throne paid too much for the chaos in Eastern Europe, it would reduce the power of Wang Tianzong's side. King Tong frowned. There are many variables. She said, how can it be so easy to find an invincible realm expert hiding in the dark? And even if you find him, he may not be willing to work for you. There must be variables, but they are not as big as you think. Tyrant has nothing. If he is unwilling to quit, he can only take a risk. This will definitely be a big gamble. If the Wang family of Beihai fully supports him, what reason does he have to refuse? As for the position, the current tyrant has no position. King Tong thought carefully. With the prestige of the Sword Emperor in the Dark World and her own authority in the Shadow Throne, King Tong believed that if she insisted on breaking the deadlock, the possibility of the entire Shadow Throne agreeing to go crazy with the Wang family of Beihai was more than 80%. However, this kind of madness was only a choice made in desperation. Tyrant was indeed a good candidate. If he was willing to cooperate with the Wang family of Beihai, the Shadow Throne naturally did not want to pay any price. Where is Tyrant? King Tong asked. A few days ago, he appeared in Snow Country. Our people were one step slower and lost him. Wang Tianzong shook his head. But don't worry. We will find him. King Tong said yes and wanted to say something more. Wang Tianzong's cell phone suddenly rang. There was only one word on the caller ID. Solstice. Wang Tianzong glanced at King Tong and did not speak. King Tong, who was full of solemnity, suddenly became resentful. I'll go downstairs to order. King Tong was silent for a moment, stood up, and casually found an excuse to leave the suite. Wang Tianzong picked up the phone and said hello. Have you had dinner? On the other end of the phone, Summer Solstice's lazy and elegant voice sounded. It should be dawn in Wulan State now. Not yet. Wang Tianzong told the truth. King Tong went downstairs to order. Were you with King Tong last night? Summer Solstice's voice was soft. This question was not easy to answer, because Wang Tianzong couldn't understand what this sentence meant. He and King Tong were in a suite. He stood on the balcony all night, and King Tong slept in the bedroom all night. Were they together or not? Wang Tianzong looked out of the window. There was a luxurious and somewhat exaggerated floor-to-ceiling window in the living room of the suite. Looking through the window, the city was rainy and cold. It's raining in Reki City. Wang Tianzong changed the topic. Summer Solstice snorted softly. Wang Tianzong laughed. I watched the starry sky on the balcony all night, and I didn't come in until it rained at dawn. Are you satisfied now? Summer Solstice giggled and joked. My Majesty is getting more and more appropriate. It's Madam who taught me well. Wang Tianzong said solemnly. At this moment, all the chaotic and swaying moods last night seemed to have completely disappeared. Wang Tianzong could only feel calmness in his heart. Eastern Europe? Is it beautiful? Summer Solstice suddenly asked. Wang Tianzong's hand holding the phone stiffened slightly for a moment. He said blandly, It's average and it's very cold. I'm not afraid of the cold. Summer Solstice's voice seemed to contain something else. Beihai is better. It's suitable for cultivation. Wang Tianzong said. Summer Solstice fell silent and did not speak for a long time. Wang Tianzong did not say anything. The silence was gentle and heavy. After a long time, Xianxia said softly, At this time, I should be by your side. As the hostess of the Wang family of Beihai, Summer Solstice rarely expressed her views on things outside Beihai. Most of the time, she was like a precious vase carefully cared for by Wang Tianzong. She was just carefree in her own little world. Fox said. But being carefree wasn't stupid. At every critical moment, Summer Solstice would appear at the right time. She really didn't understand the overall situation of the Dark World, but someone did. As long as she wanted to listen, she could hear it at any time. Therefore, she understood the subtlety of the chaos in Eastern Europe very well. He also understood how tricky the situation Wang Tianzong was dealing with at this time was. It was no exaggeration to say that in such a chaotic situation, The Wang family of Beihai was the superpower that should be the most cautious. Because the Wang family of Beihai was the strongest, but it was not strong enough to sweep everything. Such a Wang family of Beihai would easily become the target of everyone. Once the Wang family of Beihai encountered a setback in Eastern Europe, as long as it was not a serious injury, given the current situation of Zhongzhou state, there might not be many people at the top of Zhongzhou state who would be indignant. The reason was also very simple. It was because the Wang family of Beihai was powerful. So Summer Solstice wanted to make a move. In the border war, she lost all her foundation. Even with the immortality potion, which had a heaven-defying effect, she still had not recovered. But the martial arts of the Wang family of Beihai was based on outbreak. If Summer Solstice broke out with all her strength, her combat capability in an instant would not be inferior to any expert at the peak of the invincible realm. Wang Tianzong, Lin Fengting, Li Guangtu, and Summer Solstice. When the four of them learned swordsmanship together, Summer Solstice had the best talent. If there had been no battle more than 20 years ago, the Wang family of Beihai might have even had the first female chosen one in the history of the Dark World. This also meant that even if Summer Solstice's foundation had completely collapsed, she could completely break the deadlock in the shortest time with a short outbreak. This also meant that even if Xia Zhi's foundation had completely collapsed, she could completely break the stalemate in the shortest time with a short burst of power. Arcis of the Vatican, deity of the purgatory, and Lin Fengting of the Lin clan, whom the Wang family of Beihai did not want to think about now. After Summer Solstice's sword, it was basically a situation where both sides suffered. What deadlock could not be broken? No need. Wang Tianzong's eyes were calm and firm. I can handle it. Actually, it's nothing. I also want to go to Eastern Europe. Tianzong, I suddenly feel that it's almost time. Summer Solstice chuckled on the other end of the phone. Stop it. Wang Tianzong suddenly interrupted Summer Solstice. His voice was calm, with a hint of anger. The entire Mount Dibbing knew that His Majesty doted on Summer Solstice and had never lost his temper. In Summer Solstice's impression, this seemed to be the first time that Wang Tianzong had interrupted her since she knew him. Maybe it was the second time? I can handle it here. Wang Tianzong held the cup in his hand. The heavy crystal cup slowly melted into pieces in his hand. The pieces slipped down along his fingertips and fell on the tea table. The water in the cup had completely turned into steam and melted in Wang Tianzong's hand. I can handle it. Wang Tianzong said again. Summer Solstice was silent for a longer time. I'm sorry. After a long time, she whispered, I'm not, I know. Wang Tianzong laughed. His voice was low, not gentle, but strong as the sea. I can rest assured when you are at home. Not only because of the safety of you and Mount Dibbing, but also because I'm afraid that if you are not at home, I will not find the way home. There was a deep breath in the silence on the other end of the phone. Wang Tianzong held the phone tightly and said slowly, the current situation is a bit tricky, but no one in the dark world can touch me. Don't worry. In Eastern Europe, everything will have an explanation. There must be an explanation. I don't want any explanation. Summer Solstice said softly. Wang Tianzong laughed. His smile was extremely bitter and looked extremely unwilling. I'm sorry. He whispered. There were too many meanings in this sentence. Perhaps everyone in the world could understand Sword Emperor's helplessness and difficulties. Everyone in the world also understood the responsibility and weight of the Wang family of Beihai. But in Wang Tianzong's view, the so-called helplessness was his own incompetence. He only had Summer Solstice as a woman in his life. She was amazing in martial arts and was even likely to become the first female chosen one in the history of the Dark World. She was his most cherished wife. She was his world. How important was that? But the most cherished woman in his life, who should have been the most dazzling woman in the Dark World, lived a life she didn't like before in Mount Dibbing because she lost her foundation. This kind of life had lasted for more than 20 years. More than 20 years. And the person who almost ruined Summer Solstice's life was still alive. There had to be an explanation for this matter. There had to be an explanation. Wang Tianzong could apologize to summer solstice because he carried a heavy burden. But some people, they didn't deserve to apologize. Wang Tianzong silently hung up the phone and looked at the rain outside the window. In the early morning of Reki City, there was a flash of thunder in the gloomy sky. The wind was getting stronger. The rain was majestic. Wang Tianzong looked at it silently. His eyes were indifferent, but with a kind of calmness and determination to the extreme. A soft knock on the door suddenly sounded. Wang Tianzong said casually, "Come in." Seeing no response from outside the door, he raised his eyebrows slightly, stood up, and repeated in Chinese, "Come in." The door, which was not closed, was gently pushed open. There seemed to be a cloud in the suite. An old man with a sage-like appearance walked into the living room with a smile. He was dressed in a neat Taoist robe, holding a floating sink, and had white beard and white hair. Such a dress was not common even in Xianxia state, which had become more and more respectful of traditional culture in recent years. In Eastern Europe, it was a complete anomaly. However, the feeling that the old man gave off was not abrupt. Instead, it was natural, and there was already a vague feeling of returning to one's true nature. "Taoist, welcome." Wang Tianzong chuckled and asked Xianxia to sit down. He personally poured him a glass of water and put a bag of tea provided by the hotel. The tea was made very casually, but it was already a great respect and politeness from Wang Tianzong. Only one Taoist priest in Xianxia state deserved this kind of respect. Metaphysics Grandmaster. Xianxia. Taoist travels all day long. It took me a lot of effort to find you. Why don't you consider taking a rest in Mount Dibing for a while? If there is a Taoist priest in Mount Dibing, I will feel more at ease. Wang Tianzong said softly. He did not understand metaphysics, but he understood metaphysics. Although the essence of metaphysics was not omniscient and omnipotent prediction, it was not a pure conspiracy. Xianxia was a person with real talent and learning. So was Great Master Wei. Such a person might not be able to accurately predict anything without a huge push behind him, but at least he could know a general direction. This was the most real and rare part of metaphysics. The art of divination, Zhou Yi, 5 elements and 8 diagrams. Metaphysics was really mysterious and illusory. Real metaphysics grandmasters had always been rarer than invincible realm experts. The Wang family of Beihai had a profound foundation and once had its own metaphysics grandmaster, but there was no one in this generation. But Wang Tianzong could also understand the benefits that a real metaphysics grandmaster could bring to the family. In his invitation was extremely sincere. This was not the first time he had invited Xianxia. However, Xianxia had never given a clear answer. Now his status was equivalent to that of a visiting official of the Wang family of Beihai, but he rarely went to Mount Dibing. The possibility of him staying in Mount Dibing was even smaller. "I'm used to being idle. If I stay in one place for too long, I will feel uncomfortable. I'd better not stay in Mount Dibing. It's not difficult for your majesty to find me. I rarely leave Xianxia state. With the foundation of the Wang family of Beihai, it's easy to find someone in Xianxia state if you want to," Xianxia said with a warm smile. Wang Tianzong smiled, lowered his head, and lit the cigarette. In the rising smoke, an inexplicable light flashed in Xianxuanzi's eyes. The chaos in Eastern Europe was in a stalemate. Xianxuanzi knew that Wang Tianzong would find him. Even if he didn't know, Qin Weibai would tell him that Wang Tianzong would find him since he was the 13th supermaster of Samsara Palace hidden in the dark. Therefore, Xianxuanzi appeared in front of the intelligence system of the Wang family of Beihai at a more suitable time, and then he was naturally taken to Eastern Europe. Xianxuanzi was a little confused. He could roughly know Wang Tianzong's purpose, but he couldn't figure out Qin Weibai's mind. Wang Tianzong invited Xianxuanzi. Qin Weibai knew this news, but she never gave him any orders. There was no need to deliberately mislead or hide anything. Her orders were only 4 words. Tell the truth. Tell the truth to Wang Tianzong? Xianxuanzi became more and more confused about Qin Weibai's meaning. He picked up the teacup, lowered his head, and took a sip of tea. He said with a smile, "Your Majesty, have you been confused recently?" The situation in Eastern Europe is very tricky. Wang Tianzong said, Taoist priest, do you have any advice? The situation in Eastern Europe is the contemporary general trend. I can't see through it. Xianxia looked at Wang Tianzong. His eyes were calm and calm. Since he was telling the truth, he naturally had a clear conscience. Can't you see through it, Taoist priest? Wang Tianzong asked. No one can see through it. Since it is the contemporary general trend, there will inevitably be countless possibilities, and each possibility will have different causes and effects. I can't see through it and I dare not see it, Xianxia said with a smile. Wang Tianzong nodded slowly and suddenly asked, what if Beihai moves first? Xianxia was silent for a long time, as if he was calculating. After a long time, he shook his head. It's all possible. It meant that they might win or lose. Wang Tianzong narrowed his eyes and smoked a small half of the cigarette. I see that your Majesty's sword intent is extremely strong. If there is no accident, this should be the critical moment of your Majesty's martial arts in this life. In this case, I have a suggestion. Xianxia said slowly, it's better to stay still than to move. Between movement and silence, Wang Tianzong did not know how to choose, nor did he know if he could choose. That was the biggest confusion he had. Silence? He asked. Wait and see. Xianxia nodded. Wang Tianzong turned his head and looked at the direction of the office of the president through the French window of the hotel. He could not see the office of the president from this height, but the bright red color of the star flag was still clear. Wang Tianzong looked at the flag in his sight and suddenly asked, Taoist priest, do you think I can break through and become the only chosen one in the dark world? There were not so many possibilities for this kind of thing, only yes or no. So this question was easy for Xianxia to answer. Breaking through is inevitable. Xianxia did not hesitate. He answered quickly, but when he thought about it carefully, this sentence was only half a sentence. Wang Tianzong turned his head and glanced at Xianxia. Xianxia looked at Wang Tianzong strangely, with some emotion and some pity. What is the chosen one in your Majesty's mind? Xianxia suddenly asked. The chosen one is naturally an invincible person. Wang Tianzong answered without hesitation. This was his philosophy. The strongest person, the invincible person, was the chosen one. But in my opinion, the chosen one is actually perfect. Your dark world has divided martial arts into many levels, but when did your Majesty hear that the chosen one is also a level? Before the invincible realm appeared, the first invincible realm was the chosen one. Before the thunder-shocking realm appeared, the first invincible realm was the chosen one. In a sense, Li Shua, it's true that the invincible person is the chosen one, but it's not absolute. The chosen one is actually perfect. The right time, the right place, and the right people are all perfect. When countless seemingly accidental conditions gather on the strongest person, he will be the real chosen one. The chosen one is not a realm, but a person. There is only one truly invincible person. Xianxia looked at Wang Tianzong with real pity in his eyes. Taoist, do you mean that I'm not perfect? Wang Tianzong asked. Your Majesty is amazing enough. It's almost beyond the limit of human beings to reach this step and even continue to take half a step. It's a move against the natural order. The Wang family of Beihai has a deep foundation and strong fate. It also has the right time and the right place. Xianxia lowered his eyelids and told the truth, but Beihai is not stable. How can it be perfect when the right time, the right place, and the right people are all right? With your Majesty's talent, you are destined to break through the last half step. But if you don't have enough fate, I don't know what kind of state it will be, because I have never seen the real chosen one. Wang Tianzong suddenly had nothing to say. He thought for a long time and asked slowly, Taoist, can you help me? Xianxia smiled and said calmly, this is something your Majesty needs to make a choice. I can't help you. Choice? Choice. Wang Tianzong leaned forward slightly and put his hands on the table. He looked into Xianxuanzi's eyes and asked, what do I need to choose? Xianxuanzi sighed softly. He gently swung the horsetail whisk in his hand and it fell on Wang Tianzong's left hand. Your sword, he said slowly, this. He looked at his horsetail whisk and lowered his eyebrows. Wang Tianzong looked down at the horsetail whisk, and his face suddenly became a little pale. Xianxuanzi's horsetail whisk fell on the ring finger of his left hand. He wore a ring on the ring finger. It was the wedding ring of him and summer solstice. Xianxuanzi looked at him with soft eyes. Your Majesty, there are too many things in your heart. It's better to let go. Wang Tianzong was in a daze. His sword guarded the Wang family of Beihai. His ring was his past with summer solstice. Was this the so-called choice? But he forgot one thing. Xianxuanzi was talking about his sword, this. There were no words before the two. It was not sword or this, nor sword and this. It was sword this. Wang Tianzong thought about his life silently and said in a dull tone, let go. Xianxuanzi did not speak. If I let go, what would all the things I've done in this life count for? Tranquil, forbearing, glorious, warm, invincible, all of the past, what did that count for? Like the autumn leaves. Wang Tianzong looked at his palm. If I let go, Xianxuanzi said quietly, nothing in the world. Divine Emperor of 9 Heavens, you're tuning in to the Wandering Hero YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.